Jiro here for Umbra Games with a review of Mirror's Edge, played on Xbox 360. Mirror's Edge was developed by EA DICE and published by EA, released in 2008. With the sequel, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, released June 7th, 2016, I figured it was time for a Mirror's Edge review marathon, pun intended. In a world of first-person shooters, someone decided to develop a first-person game without the shooter. Well, I guess it's not entirely true, because you can get a gun and sloppily fire it while nearly immobile, but we'll hit that more here in a bit. Mirror's Edge takes place in an honestly not too distant future, seemingly utopian society, with low to no crime and shiny pretty buildings everywhere, and a city called Glass. Unfortunately, the way Glass advanced to this state was under a strict totalitarian regime, forcing control of the media, communication monitoring, and spying on its citizens. In order to pass unfiltered communication comes a profession known as the Runner, an athletic parkour master. In Mirror's Edge, you take control of a runner named Faith to sprint, jump, sneak, and flip across the rooftops of skyscrapers for her clients, and eventually for her family. With her handler Merc in her earpiece, you navigate through a prologue, 8 chapters, and an epilogue in an attempt to solve the mystery of a dead mayoral candidate working toward government deregulation. I'm going to attempt to avoid all political commentary in this review, however, I'm not going to guarantee it's not going to turn into a pun fest. So obviously, the first hurdle, foremost in my mind, is that first-person platforming is generally terrible, and at best only tolerable in small doses. So how do we remedy that? Well, 2 things. The first step is showing your avatar's feet. Fortunately, DICE made that good first leap. Faith even has some kind of trendy toe shoe thing going on. The second step, as I see it, is having a reliable character jump distance. Now, does anyone remember the first Tomb Raider game on PlayStation where you'd hold the don't step off a cliff button, walk to the edge of an impending jump, then you'd press down on the directional pad to take 1 square jump back, which translated exactly to that 1 second of running you could feel before you needed to hit the jump button to just make that long jump grabbing the far edge. There was nothing contextual in those early games. You grew to know exactly where you would end up when you jumped. Several games have jacked this up since, where you look around for quite some time because the only path you see is one that it doesn't look like you can make. I would argue, in first person, that jump reliability is even more necessary than third person, and unfortunately this is a place where Mirror's Edge struggles. There are times I would perform what felt like the exact same timing, same direction move, and got different results. There are times I didn't think a jump was possible at all, but all of a sudden, Faith got some unseeming extra boost for that particular situation. Mirror's Edge is not forgiving. I found myself constantly mumbling that I wish handholds were more sticky, the opposite of what I do for most Assassin's Creed games. Half the jumps require very near pinpoint accuracy. Now, to compensate, there are no lives, checkpoints are fairly frequent, and after practicing any given section a few times, I could get to where I'd run a near perfect line and get that sense of pride and feeling of accomplishment. After completing the 6 or so hour campaign, I noticed the extra content was time trials of the stages and separate racing playgrounds. Upon reflection, I think I started to see a little more about what DICE was aiming for. I mean, they basically wanted to make a first-person racing game. The time trials are all about finding that right line to run, and achievements are all about doing sequences of wall jumps, flips, and slides. While the campaign and the story is what I always tend to go for, I think Mirror's Edge reflects they've essentially built a parkour simulator. If you have trouble finding your way while playing the game, or just kind of prefer the assistance, there's this thing they call runner vision, where objects that help your path forward become highlighted red as you get near. These things will be like pipes on walls, boxes to jump off of, and boards precariously dangled on the edge of a roof. You can also hold the view button, and it will focus your vision on the ultimate destination, which can sometimes be misleading as your final goal isn't always in the same direction as your path to get there. The campaign level design can be summarized in 3 basic setups. The first is the rooftop running, where you're the most free and it really feels like you have a bit more choice in the lines that you want to run. You're almost constantly in motion. Holding the door open button and charging one of the red doors feels like you're Neo in that last chase scene of the first Matrix movie. You can almost feel the impact. There are a couple of chase scenes after you meet the enemy type trained to run like you do, where I felt the adrenaline pumping and was actually kind of scared to stop and look behind me. It was masterfully done. The second setup is more of a puzzle type situation, often in buildings, figuring out how to get into the vents or out to the next rooftop. Third type, I'll let you take a guess. So when you have a first-person shooterless game, what's the one thing you could do in your level design to stop that flow? How about a room full of enemies where you get plugged by 1,000 bullets before you can make it to the door? Part of this was difficulty of my own choosing because I'd heard years ago there was an achievement for completing the game without shooting an enemy. Now, it's not counted against you if you disarm or otherwise take down someone, but it just feels too obvious that DICE wants you to run through and not kill things. This is even further demonstrated by Faith's combat frailty. Now, some of these situations really got the adrenaline rushing as you were able to jump a car, slide under a barrier, and hop over the cops, or blues as they call them, and make it to the door. However, there were a handful of situations where that's not an option. Not gonna lie, it was really frustrating. There's a tutorial in the prologue that teaches you how to fight, but by the time you reach a forced combat situation, I challenge anyone to remember how it was you were supposed to counterattack or slide tackle an enemy. Not only that, but keeping with the runner's vision, as you get close to an enemy, they'll stop firing you and attempt to swing. The weapon will turn red in the moment you're supposed to grab it, and Faith will then do a disarm animation, knocking out the enemy. I've never felt a counterattack timing be so inconsistent. I'd hit it exactly when the red blip showed up. Then I'd try leading the red blip. I tried hitting it when it felt natural to counter. Nothing gave me reliable results. Not only that, but the animation for disarming takes so long that if you're not in cover, you probably won't survive if there are two enemies in line of sight. Which, I understand, is how an unarmed person fighting armed people would be. I get that. But it stopped the flow. And, according to EA, that's what it's all about. I also don't understand why slide kicking someone to stun them doesn't let you also take away their gun while they're bent over in half, as that would have helped me keep said flow. There is one type of collectible, in the form of runner bags, left at specific cache locations marked by the runner symbol. There are 3 per stage, and most are very well hidden. I think I ended the game with 14-ish, 15, something like that out of 30. They don't appear to be the key to unlocking any extra content from the main menu or anything, but seem merely to exist to provide a bit more replay value for completionists. So finally, I'd like to talk a bit about the game's aesthetics. This whitewashed city of glass with its primary and secondary color interiors, the red runner vision, and your main enemy being blues, was very effective. DICE did a great job of showing what a creatively suppressed society would look like. It wasn't the cleanness of a Mass Effect citadel or ship pushing the boundaries of human imagination. It was an emotionally deprived, very nearly depressing place to be, with these towering, shimmering colossi. On reflection, it's odd that I didn't run into any non-hostile NPCs in the entire campaign. Where were all the people? I'm also curious about the choice of the animated cutscene as opposed to 3D models and zooming out or just interacting with characters that way. The voice acting in them was great quality, and I have no qualms with this choice of presentation, and the story in them was gripping as well. It just felt like art in an artless place. But maybe with a main character named Faith in a hopeless place, they were portraying hope, or maybe I'm just thinking too much about it. The soundtrack was perfectly paired with the gameplay, providing a great electronic ambiance, as well as proper crescendos when the action began. As usual, I have my 1 to 100 rating scale based on genre, with 50 being an average game and 100 being a perfect one, which so far doesn't exist. And Mirror's Edge gets classified as a first-person shooter platformer hybrid. Rated as such, it receives a 58 out of 100. This is Jiro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching. Like what you see? Feel free to subscribe to the channel for updates, or follow me on Twitter @UmbraGames to see what I'm playing next or make a request.